This is a comment about TYT. This is a comment about what TYT said, their stance on it. Ana Kasparian, listen up.
Hi, my name is Malika. I'm calling from Raleigh, North Carolina. And I basically want to talk, this is my first time calling. I am currently a trans teenager. I'm 19. And I wanted to talk, the impetus is that I heard some people, I'll just use initials AK and BB, talking about the same thing you heard in 2016, that the left was obsessed with quote unquote boutique issues like pronouns and bathrooms, and that's why Hillary lost. But we're seeing the same kind of talking points come where they're saying, why aren't we talking about economic concerns and material concerns as juxtaposed to cultural issues like trans issues and abortion, etc. And basically, I wanted to say that as a trans teenager, one, we're not really being listened to. Every time you see CNN talk about Dylan Mulvaney and all of these topics, and there's not a single trans person ever on any of these panels, I'm concerned that my access to healthcare will be banned because they're proposing like under 21 or something.
Of course.
That healthcare will be.
That's happening in other states for adults. They're trying to ban. I forget exactly which state it is. Bradley, maybe you could look that up. But like, which was it? Florida that restricted gender affirming care for adults too?
It was Florida. It was Florida that like said that nurse practitioners could not issue care. And so, since when is healthcare a boutique issue? First of all, and also, like.
When people say like ban trans healthcare, like I think that sounds too fluffy for me. I think that sounds far too light. What people are doing is I don't want to say the K word, but it's stopping trans people living, if you know what I mean. Whether that be preventing them from transitioning and them having to live an unauthentic life, or whether that means causing them so many issues in their health, in their social expression, that they don't want to carry on doing that thing. I feel like people are already a bit too numb of just hearing like ban trans healthcare. Like, let me also just remind people, especially in the UK, anyone new to this, the medical system is not even perfect anyway. Like, I've heard so many stories of people that have been taken off hormones. I've had botched facial feminization surgery. That's why you'll always see me with a full fringe, because I had a forehead shave and it did not work, and I was left with one of my eyes permanently damaged because of the bone cement that dripped down. And I was left with headaches every day. That's why I left my corporate job and I started a YouTube. So when they're trying to ban what healthcare we already have, that means that's the Michael Knowleses of the world. That's the we should exterminate trans people quote. Not having access to trans care sounds like, oh, I can't get braces, or like, oh, I can't get my hair done, or like, oh, I can't get breast. No. It's unaliving.
The response from like the Democrats and mainstream media has been like, oh, well, like just let trans kids deal with it in accordance with their parents. And
if an issue is about a minority group's healthcare, you could call that boutique. I mean, I would say that's fairly right-wing framing, but what it really is it's an issue set for a minority. And like, we said this before, but to cave to what the majority wants or what the majority is comfortable with as it relates to trans healthcare, to put those issues aside, is to essentially cave to a majoritarian impulse, which puts issues that are specific to a minority group to the side as boutique and says, well, we're not going to address that really in general. But that's the very nature of an issue that's about minorities, which trans people are a minority in this country.
I love Emma. I think I'm falling in love with Emma. I better let my husband know. This is a comment about TYT. This is a comment about what TYT said, their stance on it. Ana Kasparian, listen up. The idea that we should just not really care about like the trans issue. We shouldn't talk about trans women in sport. We shouldn't worry about trans care, because it might not win us the election, is the most dystopian idea I've heard. And it's 2023. We've been for our fair share of dystopian times, if you recall. I haven't got the connection to politics or political parties enough to care, quite frankly, about long term, about like the end goal being politics and the same system, the same people, especially in the UK. Speaking in the UK for a second, the Labour Party, which is the equivalent of the Democrats, right, have basically sided with the right-wing Conservative Party when it comes to trans issues. So for a trans person, there is no good outcome, quite frankly. There just isn't. And there hasn't been for a while. Let alone if you think about being a socialist, how any of these parties are extremely capitalist. They're not going to change the system, which won't change global warming, which won't, there's so many injustices and systematic issues. None of that's going to matter. We're talking about a minority of people that are in danger. They need protection, and they are being targeted, physically targeted by religious right mostly. And it's so bad there are words I can't even say to describe it on YouTube. I really respect the Majority Report stance, Emma and Sam's stance on this, going against what TYT have said about Cenk and Ana, who, as we'll see later in the stream, stick to their guns. They're not changing their stance on this, which is wild.
I would reframe it and turn it back on those people, though, because the actual cultural BS is that people shouldn't get distracted on is things like birthing person, and the material things that people should keep their eye on includes abortion care and includes trans care, because those are just a subset of health care. And what are we after? Universal health care. And you don't have universal. And so the idea that people can't be trusted generally with universal health care, the state to provide them health care, is the same idea, just more particular when you say women can't be trusted to get abortion services, or trans people can't be trusted to pursue trans health care.
The argument, too, that it is inhibiting the ability of Democrats to achieve, reforms that would provide material benefit for people, to be sidetracked by this. There is absolutely no support. It's the exact same argument, frankly, that we heard from, it was Hillary Clinton was one of the major espousers of this in 2004, that we should back off abortion rights because it is inhibiting the ability of Democrats to attract people, and it is and we should say abortion rights were considered more secure than the rights of trans people at this time. So it was more, it's even less tenuous. And what it did is it softened up the ground for what we ended up seeing with the Supreme Court. It also did not attract any voters.
Call me crazy, call me an anarchist, call me a left-wing nutjob, but any system at all in which there is a small amount of people that can decide that the majority, the large mass of people cannot control their own bodies, decide what healthcare they can have access to basic human rights. Whatever system that has, whether we have a good party in or a bad party in, I find that dystopian. I find that wild.
And we now know that when you have an issue where the American public is, is supportive, and even if the American public is not supportive of every single sort of element of trans rights, the fact is the American public does not think this is an issue. And if the Democrats, if the argument that, we hear from different quarters on the, left of center is that fighting and defending trans people's rights is inhibiting Democratic getting elected, I would argue that, in fact, on the contrary, the more Republicans attack trans people, the more this is a winning issue for Democrats, at least in the context of national elections. I mean, in deep red states, and North Carolina, is not one, but there is certainly, huge sort of red elements there. We're going to see trans rights trampled and attacked, and trans people, both eliminationist rhetoric and, actions. But in terms of like what the federal government can do down the road and in changing people's minds about this, pressing the point, I think is helpful for Democrats,
Yes.
On a national level.
One thing I just want to add as well, anyone cisgender watching this now and is listening and thinking, yeah, that's real bad for the trans community. Maybe I have a trans friend and they're going to be affected. Let's just take a step and realise that the actions that are going to be needed to enforce this anti-trans rhetoric are going to affect all cis people as well. 100%. They already are. There are cis women in toilets that aren't feminine enough being questioned and harassed. There are cis women in sports that have too much testosterone that are being affected by the sports bans. There are the connection to body autonomy and the prevention of abortion is innately linked. If you can't see that link, then let's talk about it. Let's look into it. In the UK, the government are giving guidance to not allowing socially transitioning students in schools, preventing any gender expression from the other binary. So girls can't cut their hair short. Girls can't wear trousers. Boys can't wear skirts. Boys can't have nail polish on. Okay, we are going into a world where, in order to enforce this anti-trans rhetoric, they're going to push back everything. They're going to pull back the rights of everyone. That includes cis people. It's already happening.
To Sam's point, too, there has not been any empirical evidence that shows that advocating for trans rights hurts Democrats electorally. In fact, it's been the opposite. That's what the 2022 midterm show. So if you're still making that claim without that empirical evidence, that kind of just lends credence to accusations that it's really just you that has the problem with trans people, not generally what your read is on the population. And so it's not a boutique issue to focus on trans healthcare, because gender affirming care is healthcare in and of itself. And it's a false notion that you can separate the care and the emancipation of minority groups from other, material, class-based political issues. If we could live in that reality and you can segment it like that, maybe you'd have an argument. But like, we live in reality as opposed to something that's more like working backwards from your discomfort with trans people and then making a political argument based on that.
All that said, Moika, none of this, the broader political implications don't necessarily help your situation. And, I'm sorry that you're dealing with this sort of the stress about, whether you're going to be able to get health care over the course of the next couple of years. Hang in there. I can't imagine that it's been an easy road for you.
Yeah, thank you. And I am fortunate enough to where I have had at least one supporting parent who has given me the ability to transition, and like all of my friends at school, and they were really losing us because like nobody has an issue with me like using the women's bathroom, and nobody has ever made this apparent to me. Like no professors, no teachers, no like random people. Like the only time I've ever gotten somebody to say something is when I've actually used the men's restroom one time. And so it's really just disconnected. It strikes me as disconnected that I'm supposed to distrust my entire lived experience.
I'm just going to jump on that one point as well. This lovely caller, she's saying about toilets, right? Let's just talk about this, because maybe people are forgetting. What are we meant to do? What am I meant to do? Look at me now. The trolls will be like, you're a man, whatever, fine. But look at me, genuinely. Am I meant to use the male loo? There are trans men out there that look so masculine that surely they would make cis women, TERFs, uncomfortable in their toilets. This is what I mean about enforcing rules that cannot be enforced. And in order to do so, they're going to have to go so far. If I walked into a male loo, there would be like, oh, sorry, love, where are you going? Confusion. I've actually had, this is a fun anecdote. I'm going to share this with everyone. I was in the female loos once in like a bar or a club somewhere. and you'll understand this. I had a guy walked into the toilet, right? Male expressing, looked like a cis guy, walked into the toilet, and I, in my mind, instantly went full on like, oh my gosh, I've gone to the wrong loo and I'm trans, so it's going to look like I'm a trans woman in a male loo. What's going to happen? Oh my gosh. And the guy just looked at me and went, oh, sorry, love, am I in the girls' loo? And I'm still half having a heart attack. And I'm like, I think so. Yeah, this is the girls' loo. Sorry, I think, unless I'm wrong. And then he said to me, 100% plainly, no evilness in him. He went, oh, maybe I'm one of them transgenders. And my mind is like, yeah, they're out there secretly.
If you don't mind me asking, were you able to access care easily as a teenager?
So it wasn't easy as a teenager. In fact, there was like a wait list of like at least a good half a year just to like get a consultation for like the potentials of care. That was a half a year. And then you had to go through I had already been talking with a therapist for upwards of 3 years. And so I had to get an official letter from my therapist, multiple of them, a psychiatrist. And it was all a lot of like annoying procedural hurdles that I had to navigate at like 17. So like that's already an issue. And then additionally, once I actually got there, they were just, they applied the affirmative care model because what I've gone through all of this and you're going to tell me that I am not trans? Like that seems absurd. Like the amounts that I've gone through to just get access to a consultation is now being used to say that like everybody is transitioning, when I have friends who grew up and they quote unquote desisted and stopped identifying as trans and started living as their gender assigned at birth, and they never had any issues with trans people getting transition healthcare. And so desistance is in fact proof that the system, the affirmative care model, is working, that people who aren't really trans aren't getting trans healthcare. But in fact, a lot of people that are trans are being restricted from getting this healthcare, and that is the harm that is being caused.
Absolutely. And to just jump in on that as well, in the UK as well, there are so many people that say, like, everyone's transitioning, it's happening all over the place, it's so easy. No, the actual truth behind it is that there might be more people kind of understanding what transgender means in themselves from a younger age and coming out as non-binary and everything like that. But the hurdles that we have to jump in order to get trans healthcare remain ridiculous, especially in the UK. It sounds like in the US as well. I think Abigail Thorne from Philosophy Tube did a video on it about emailing the national healthcare system 133 times or something. Don't quote me on that number. And it's so far from people just walking into a clinic and the stereotypical right-wing idea of like, well, what if a man just turned out to just said he was trans and then went into a toilet and attacked women? Like, show me the receipts. That's not happening.
You know, the cost associated with making it impossible for trans youth to get care is undoubtedly greater than the opposite situation. I mean, it's just really that simple. But really,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Last thing is just that I want to take the moment to say that, like, yes, like the whole trans healthcare saved my life. It's not a fiction. Like, trans healthcare very materially has benefited me and everybody I know to have received healthcare. Like, and I probably know more trans people as a trans person than everyone who has talked about this issue. Like, a lot of people are forced to talk about this issue and really they have no connection to it. Right. And trans healthcare is unequivocally like one of the best things that could have happened to me, and I've never been happier with my life living as a trans girl than when I was living in a closet. And in fact, I have more regret about the time I was convinced that being trans was going to be too much. There was a time where I thought that being trans wasn't worth it, and those are the times that I have regretted not living in my truth sooner. And so to anybody else out there, I just want you to know that it is always worth it to live as your trans self if you happen to be trans, or live as whoever you are. And the fact that that message is so seemingly polarizing in online spaces, not really in real life, but in online spaces, is just mind-boggling to me.
Well, I appreciate your calling in, and I'm glad that you're doing well, at least in the context of, like, you know, decisions you've made and being able to live your life in a way that makes you happy. And hang in there. It may get rougher in the short term, but you know, I think ultimately we're going to get back to a place where the type of hate and obstacles that are being put in the way of particularly trans youth, but trans people broadly, I think is going to go away. So, but hang in there. Really admire your perseverance and your attitude towards this. Impressive. You know, like to have to sort of, like, on top of just the difficulty in being a teenager. To have to navigate this stuff.
Really good point at the end there by Sam. Really, really good point. Let's not forget that anyone having to deal with this at a young age are also battling with everything difficult, not only as a teenager, which everyone that had a teenage period understands, but also just the minefield that is life at the moment. COVID, climate change, everything. Imagine having this on top. Like, no wonder Gen Z don't want to work. So, as many of you know, I cover the Majority Report clips, but mostly the trans-related ones, because I do think that there is a bit of a lack of trans representation of actual trans people on the Majority Report. However, we do have the lovely Sam Seder and Emma. She always says the perfect stuff, and I'm a huge The Majority Report fan. So I cover their clips every so often. If you're new, thank you so much. Again, let's also talk about what the Young Turks and TYT and Ana Kasparian and Jen were all asking when they said, okay, well, understand about trans rights and everything, but don't support trans women in sport because it's not a winning issue. You'll lose the opinion of the electorate. Let's break that down for a second.